progress here in Massachusetts. Our goal, of course, is to continue to drive down those numbers, but that's only possible with the vigilance and the discipline of every resident. Recently, there have been reports of community outbreaks, in many cases that were linked to parties or a location that wasn't complying with the COVID-19 guidance that's been issued by the Commonwealth and by the feds. In many cases, people haven't been wearing face coverings or socially distancing. And the positive increase, we've seen a slight increase in our positive test rate as we've continued to expand our testing capacity. The reality of COVID-19 is it does not follow any rules. It can spread rapidly if people don't take the appropriate precautions. It's not taking the summer off, and we can't either if we want to continue to fight and contain the virus and keep our economy going. People in Massachusetts have worked exceptionally hard over the course of the past several months to get to this point. Our frontline healthcare workers, our small businesses, our individuals, our moms and dads, our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, to beat back this insidious and at times invisible virus and to get back to some degree of normalcy. To all our residents, I can't express this enough. Don't be careless or complacent. Wear a face covering, socially distance, and practice the good hygiene that has had such a big part to play in our success so far. Use common sense when it comes to visiting with family and friends under all circumstances. Observe the sector guidance that's been issued by the Commonwealth to ensure that your activities and your businesses are operating under the appropriate precautions. Until we have a treatment or a vaccine, I know you're working on that one, we have to learn how to continue to live with this virus. I can't stress this enough. We must do our part as individuals, as families, and as communities to prevent the spread of COVID-19. We'll obviously continue to analyze and produce data to see if there are adjustments that we can make, and we'll continue to trace and isolate every possible case. But these efforts alone won't keep the virus in check. People need to do their jobs with face coverings, distance, hand washing, and everyone thinking twice about what they're doing and how they're socializing with their friends, their family, and their neighbors. Now, with respect to Pfizer, Lieutenant Governor and I were up here a few years ago on the groundbreaking of this building, which is in fact where a big part of the exciting work that's being done to deal with COVID is taking place. We know the Commonwealth has always been a leader in innovation, and we're lucky to have some of the best and brightest minds in research, science, and medicine right here in our backyard. The doctors and scientists are world class, and here at Pfizer, we see that every day firsthand. Pfizer's been working hard to provide a safe environment for their team to continue supporting medical advancements that change patients' lives, all while prioritizing COVID-19 response efforts. The site manufactures vaccines and life-saving medicines to treat cancer and hemophilia, which Jon mentioned, and their team of expert scientists has also been working around the clock to bring breakthrough solutions to patients. As we continue to fight this virus against COVID-19, a vaccine and a treatment can't come soon enough. Pfizer is developing one of the most advanced COVID-19 vaccines. On Monday, they began the last stage, or phase 3, of an experimental COVID-19 study that seeks to enroll 30,000 people. The Andover team has been working on the development, manufacture, and testing of a potential COVID-19 vaccine day in and day out for the past few months, and it's being developed in the lab behind us, supported by their incredible Massachusetts-based team. As Jon said, they're moving quickly, and they're targeting the fall to file for regulatory approval or emergency use authorization. Some of their highly advanced testing sites will be located right here in the Commonwealth. It's all pretty remarkable, but not surprising, that we have this type of research and development for this global pandemic happening right here in the Commonwealth. A vaccine or a treatment is critical to breaking the cycle of this insidious virus and helping us all return to something more like regular normal. We're grateful for the genius and the diligence of this team and hopeful that they will continue to make progress in the coming months. On behalf of Lieutenant Governor, myself, the people of the Commonwealth, the people of this country, the people of the world, thank you for your leadership role in pursuing a vaccine to this insidious virus. I'll let Meg Ruesch, the Vice President of Worldwide R&D, get into more details on the vaccine program. But before I turn the podium over, I want to make a short announcement to our residents about something that has nothing to do with this. There are some unsolicited packages from a foreign country containing planting seeds that have been mailed to hundreds and perhaps thousands of people in Massachusetts and in 39 other states nationwide. The U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Mass Department of Agriculture have notified the public that these seeds, if planted, are thought to be for invasive plant species that could be very harmful to our environment. Locusts, what's next? We don't believe they're harmful to humans, but please don't plant them. And if you receive one of these packages, please report it to the Mass Department of Agriculture. They have a form on their website for reporting. So far, around 400 packages of these seeds have been reported, and it's critical that they not be planted to protect our environment here in Massachusetts. Thanks for the opportunity to deliver that advertisement. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Meg.
Thank you, Governor and Lieutenant Governor, for coming here. It really means a lot to all of us on this site. My name is Meg Ruesch, and I'm the Research and Development Site Leader here. As Jon mentioned, here at Pfizer Andover, we are very proud to play a key role in the fight against COVID-19. We have recently begun manufacturing a key component called the drug substance for the COVID-19 investigational vaccine candidate. This manufacturing is being undertaken at risk so that we are ready with this drug substance if clinical trials are successful and regulatory authorization is granted by the FDA. I'd like to share a little bit more about the exciting work we do here and about the COVID-19 vaccine candidate. In March, Pfizer and BioNTech announced a collaboration to develop a potential COVID-19 vaccine. This collaboration brought together BioNTech's proprietary mRNA vaccine platform and Pfizer's extensive experience in the global development and manufacturing of vaccines. This mRNA vaccine introduces into the body the genetic instructions for the cell to make a specific protein, in this case, a SARS-CoV-2 protein, which is intended to stimulate an immune response. We make that mRNA right here in Andover using a well-controlled process involving a template, mRNA building blocks, and enzymes. The mRNA component of the vaccine candidate is purified and shipped as a frozen solution to other Pfizer global facilities for further manufacture and filling into vials. To prepare for this manufacturing, over the past months, our scientists have been studying the production process, determining how to make larger batches called scaling up, and implementing testing protocols to closely and carefully study the vaccine candidate's quality. Clinical data for the vaccine has been encouraging so far. Earlier this month, we announced positive preliminary top-line phase 1/2 findings, and just this week, we announced the start of a large phase 2/3 safety and efficacy trial with our lead COVID-19 investigational vaccine candidate. We have the potential, subject to technical success and regulatory authorization, to manufacture up to 100 million vaccine doses by the end of this year and up to 1.3 billion doses by the end of 2021. Our ability to manufacture mRNA with quality and speed at Pfizer Andover is due to the outstanding scientists, engineers, and support staff we have here. In the fight against this global pandemic, we truly believe that science will win. I'm very proud to be working here at Pfizer in Massachusetts. we are truly contributing to breakthroughs that change patients' lives. I'll turn it back over for questions from the governor.
Questions on topic for these folks?
I actually have a question for you, Meg, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I know you maybe can't answer this, but when can Massachusetts residents get the shot in the arm, wherever it would be? Would it be a one-shot, or would it be a seasonal thing like the flu?
Yeah, it's a great question, and certainly we're anxious to see how the efficacy trial works, and that will inform that. You know, I can comment a little on what we're doing between now and October. We're working on making as much vaccine as possible so that it's ready. We hope to file as early as October for some kind of authorization. That will be dependent on the rigorous review by the FDA and the clinical data itself. So we're hoping to have this vaccine ready by the end of the year, which, you know, could be the earliest that we might see approval. It really will depend on the data itself in this trial that was just launched. Yes, it is. The current trial is 2 doses of vaccine.
And what do you say to people who are nervous about the vaccine being rushed?
Oh, it's a great question. We do not compromise quality. We are, you know, very experienced in working in the production of high quality vaccines and biotherapeutics. We don't cut any quality corners. And the review process of the clinical safety and efficacy data will be very rigorous and in collaboration with the FDA. It's a great question. So the question was, are Massachusetts residents able to take part in the clinical trial? So the trial will be up to 30,000 patients, and the way to take part in that clinical trial is to go on to Pfizer's website, and you can see if there's a location near you. It's just started this week, and I'm not involved in the execution of the trial, but it's possible there could be locations. I will say I do think a lot of the locations are where COVID-19 is more prevalent.
So I think our current guidance right now is it 50 outdoors? 100 outdoors. 25 in. I think that's one of the things we're talking about. But the bigger issue is not so much the nature of the size of some of these gatherings, especially the private, the ones that are going on in backyards and places like that. The bigger issue is, honestly, the behavior generally at those, which is not socially distanced, no masks, and in some respects a lack of respect for how this virus works and how it moves from person to person. There are a lot of things we don't know about COVID, right? And we're all constantly learning as we go here. But the one thing we do know about it is the only way it succeeds and survives is by jumping from one person to another. And we also know that one of the most effective tools we have in the toolbox to keep it from jumping from one person to another is to wear a mask or stay at least 6 feet away from somebody. Those things are pretty much confirmed by everybody. And I think in some respects, this is as much about the way we choose to behave and the way we choose to deal with this virus as it is almost anything else.
Governor, with that being said, I know we're taking this day by day. We're trying to find a vaccine. Do you ever see a path to go backwards in phases? A slight increase in some of the cases?
Yeah, I mean, we're currently looking at a lot of the clusters that have popped and to determine where and how those clusters happened. Generally speaking, most of the clusters that have developed so far have all involved what I would refer to as private recreational activity and behavior. The employer community, for the most part, is maniacal about abiding by the guidance and the rules and the protocols that have been developed by the Commonwealth. And I think one of the points we're going to try to make to people as we talk about some of these clusters in more detail, which we'll do soon, is to recognize and understand that the weather may be nice and we may have a fairly low positive test rate at this point, but it is no time to let up on the basic tools that manage and support infection control. Most of the people here today are wearing a mask. I'll be wearing one if I'm not standing in front of this podium. We wore ones when we toured the building. If you walk around many neighborhoods in the Commonwealth, you'll see a lot of people. More than 70% of the people you'll see will be wearing a mask. You go into a restaurant or a supermarket or a retailer, you will see most of the time, most of the people wearing a mask. But I promise you, you will also see examples and circumstances of a significant percentage of people not wearing a mask, not socially distancing, not doing the things that got us to this point we're at today. I can't express, I know it sounds like an old man talking to my children when I say this, but a big part of this is about the decisions and the behavior of all of us as individuals. And that is in many ways what we're discovering when we look, Governor Raimondo said they did a pretty decent dive on a bunch of their data in Rhode Island around their increase in positive test rates. And she basically concluded that people were not paying attention to some of the basic guidance in many of their private recreational activities. And I have to say, based on what we've seen so far, I would say that's a very similar circumstance to what we have here.
Governor Andover that's having buildings today to possibly roll back things like indoor dining. They say they don't have the infrastructure on it even the islands to take care of these. How concerned are you, and how many people are going to do that thing?
We've been talking to folks on the islands for the better part of the past few months about many of these issues, and frankly, one of the reasons we chose to take our order on travel and amp it up a bit was due to some of the information we were getting from what I would call sort of some of places like that. I think the other thing I would say is, again, if you talk to the folks on Nantucket and many of the other places where we've seen some of these clusters, recreational behavior has a lot to do with where these clusters are coming from.
Any update on the opening of zones about that?
I think school districts are expected to submit sort of their three-pronged approach to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It's either tomorrow or Monday, isn't it? It's tomorrow. We'll obviously know a lot more when we see that. I think from our point of view, the pediatric community, many of the child welfare folks, many of the folks in the special ed world want to see schools reopen. I think that's in the best interest of kids. But part of the reason we asked folks to develop 3 plans for this is because it's going to be very hard to tell where not just the Commonwealth in entirety is, but where regions of the Commonwealth and communities of the Commonwealth are as we head into the fall. And we thought it was important for people to develop plans to be able to deal with all 3 of those options.
So you have any plan for school buses? These districts say they don't have a way to get everyone to school with the guidelines, and they don't have other options like maybe walking over 2 miles. Is that something you guys are looking into?
Yeah, I'd say 2 things about that. The first is, remember, we put more than $900 million, almost $1 billion out in federal money and some state money over the course of the past month or so to support community investments, including education, and the things they need to do to deal with the changes in operations that would be associated with COVID. We've got guidance out there with respect to transportation. We started having conversations with alternative transportation providers to see if some of them could step up and help communities where that would be necessary. But that's certainly something that we're going to continue to work with folks on to see if we can find solutions for. And I've said many times that, remember, some of this, when it comes to COVID generally, becomes a function of what we know at a particular point in time. And that's part of the reason why we ask communities to develop 3 approaches. because it could very well be that districts open in the fall, they go back, something happens, a kid tests positive in the 3rd grade. We then need to be able to work with that community to make sure that we test appropriately to determine if it's one kid or if it's more than one kid, and then make decisions about how to deal with that after the fact. And I think the most important thing I can say about this is it's going to be important for people to follow the guidance with respect to what we know in other countries is working right now with respect to keeping people, kids and teachers safe. Our special ed community, which has continued to serve kids throughout this whole period of time with remarkably low infection rates, has a lot that they can teach us with respect to how to do this. And I think it's going to be important that we all continue to learn and recognize and understand that the answer to many of these questions is going to be an answer that gets developed by the real world experience that we and other people have as we go forward. Yep. I think Lieutenant Governor and I get asked a lot about what we think the legislature should do. We recognize and understand that they'll kind of figure that out for themselves. I think the decision they made, so far the House has made the decision. The Senate's talked about doing it with respect to extending the session, is driven in many ways by the lost time that was associated with COVID. I mean, there are many people who lost a lot of time between sort of the middle of March and the middle of June, and I know the legislature feels that way, and they have a number of pretty important elements that are currently working their way through the process. I mean, I'm obviously very interested in seeing the housing choice legislation so that we can start building more senior, more affordable, more workforce housing more quickly here in Massachusetts. That was one of the elements that moved in the economic development bill that went from the House to the Senate. Big shout out to the House and to Chairman Honan and to the other members of the Housing Committee and the Ways and Means Committee for making that happen. I would love to see that find its way to get back. If that means they need to stay in session for stuff like that to make it through. I was glad to see the House move a health care bill. We now have a conference committee, I'm assuming, that will set up between the Senate and the House on the health care issue. They already have a conference committee that's working on the transportation bond bill. That's really important for a whole bunch of reasons. They're continuing to work through some of the issues around the policing bill, where they have two very large and very complicated bills in both branches. We filed the first one in early June. I mean, there's a lot going on there. And by the way, we don't know exactly what the final federal response to all these issues around COVID is going to be. And that has real consequences for both state and municipal budgets in fiscal 21. And that requires as a certainty that at some point we in the House and the Senate are going to have to finalize our budget, but it's hard for us to do that until we know exactly what the feds are going to do. So on some level, I think had a lot to do with COVID, but there's also a lot of work that's still in process that I think a lot of us would like to see get done. Yeah. So we held municipal elections in the Commonwealth over the course of the past few months, and in some cases at a point in time when our positive test rate was, north of 10%. We held legislative elections, hotly contested legislative elections over that same period of time. I can just tell you in Swampscott, which is a small town, a lot of people did this with absentee ballots. Election day, they completely changed the way they handled polling, reduced the number of polling places, went to much bigger spaces, spread everybody out. It worked fine. I think it's critically important that the election that is scheduled for the fall in September and November happen. And I think the legislation that we signed and that the legislature worked on earlier to make mail-in voting possible, especially for seniors and others who may have a particular predisposition toward illness, to be able to vote from home without having to go to a polling place, was the right thing to do. But I think, look, We've had elections in the midst of world wars. We've had an election in the midst of a civil war. We've had elections many times in this country during terrible, awful circumstances. But elections need to happen, and there's no reason why this one can't happen when it's supposed to happen in September and November.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And again, thank you to Pfizer.